I'm a feminist, but feminism has become exhausting. Feminism has become too complicated and too polarizing. So when I caught myself thinking, are you a real feminist? A perfect feminist? The kind of feminist people expect? I was confused. I've called myself a feminist for a very long time, and no, this wasn't some bored at midnight existential crisis. The real reason was this. Somewhere along the way, feminism has stopped feeling like a movement, and has started feeling like a test, or a checklist of standards that you have to meet before you're even allowed to call yourself a feminist. Before we go any further, let me take you on a quick road trip through my life as a feminist. Before I even had the vocabulary to explain gender equality, I grew up with a feminist education. My mom never questioned whether I wanted to be a princess or a musketeer, and my parents talked very openly about everything. When I was 12, everything changed because I finally chose the word feminist for myself. I researched, I debated a lot, and I brought feminism to breakfast, lunch, dinner, car rides, and basically any moment where people were simply trying to live their lives. In high school, I became even more involved. By junior year, I became an officer of the feminist club at my school, and now, as president, I've organized workshops and speakers about gender violence, gender equality, women in the media, women in sports, toxic relationships, and so forth. Throughout my whole life, I've tried to open spaces and discussions for women to feel heard, safe, and empowered. And up until a few months ago, I felt like I was doing everything that I could for the feminist movement at my age, while also juggling friends, school, and the rest of my life. This perspective changed when one day I overheard someone in my class say that the feminist club at my school has never made a real change, and that feminists in Mexico only talk about sorority on Women's Day, but that's just kind of it. After many sleepless nights, something finally clicked. No matter how much you do, you will never be feminist enough. You will never be good enough, and you will never be a perfect feminist. We now even have a term like the feministómetro, a word in Spanish that describes the scale in which we measure how feminist a person is supposed to be. But here's the absurdity. Women are already juggling impossible standards that feminism should be shielding us from. But as of today, feminism has created a new category of standards. We have to support women unconditionally. We can never be angry at each other, and you can never dislike another woman. If you want to be a stay-at-home mom, people will think about how feminism has worked very hard to give you more opportunities than that. But if you hold a leadership position, people will comment on how you talk too much to men, and how you must have slept your way to the top. If you're a man, sometimes you can't even say that you're a feminist. You have to say that you're an ally. But if you say that you're not a feminist, then you get flagged as a sexist. It's exhausting, and it's distracting us all from the real fight. This is not just happening at my school. It is happening worldwide. A study conducted by the Global Institute of Women's Leadership at King's College London suggests that Gen Z is very divided when it comes to feminism. 53% of women consider themselves to be feminists, but only 32% of men do. The biggest gap in any generation surveyed. Why? Because the word feminist has become heavy and confusing. Many people prefer to use the classic, "I'm not a feminist, but," followed by a feminist perspective, before even of thinking of calling themselves a feminist. Many times, this is just because they don't consider themselves to be morally flawless. Now, you might be thinking that the problem here is that we're looking for the perfect feminist, when in reality, the problem is that this perfectionism is a form of oppression. Amy Grant, a feminist therapist, puts it best by saying that this perfectionism is designed to keep us small, to make us think that we're not good enough, and to burn us out before we can even start making a change. So here's the solution. Everyone should be a feminist. And it shouldn't be hard to be a feminist because, according to American scholar and activist Bell Hooks, it just means that you want to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression. After that simple definition, and after filtering out all of the stereotypes and the requirements to be a feminist, I can assure you that more people in the audience now consider themselves a feminist. Welcome. I want to remind you that not every disagreement in feminism is a moral conflict. We can believe in the same fundamental things, like a woman's right to control her own body, and still take different paths to defend that right. Take the debate around pornography as an example. Some feminists argue that the industry harms women and reinforces exploitation. Therefore, it should be banned. Other feminists argue that pornography and banning pornography actually criminalizes women in it and harms them even further. Do you see? Same goal, but different strategy. So while we're all fighting for the same outcomes, women's safety, autonomy, and freedom, we tear each other down as if having different perspectives made one of us less feminist. So now you might be asking, why should we care? Why should we reform a movement yet again that has changed so much in the past decades? Well, because if we keep this system, we will never get anywhere. Division is slowing us down. And while we're busy measuring and arguing who should be a feminist and who shouldn't, then the patriarchy wins. Men, don't be afraid to call yourselves a feminist, because the more, the merrier. Be a man who understands the systemic patriarchal structures that repress women. Be a man that challenges the harmful stereotypes of masculinity. Be a man that combats sexist language and behavior. Be a feminist. Women, accept people into the movement. Do not create divisions and do not use power dynamics to marginalize and judge as the patriarchy does. Inform yourselves on the repercussions of letting gendered hierarchies rule our lives. Enlighten yourselves with the benefits of gender equality and fight for it. Be a feminist. Be an imperfect feminist, because the feminist movement has never been about achieving flawlessness. The feminist movement is about evolving. I've seen what happens when we stop measuring each other. When we replace judgment with listening, learning, and collective action. That's when change really happens. A few years ago, my mom, my aunt, and I started a small menstrual product drive called Septiembre Rojo. Our goal is to fight period poverty, what UNICEF defines as the inability to afford menstrual products and/or access to water and sanitation to manage menstrual health and hygiene. What pushed us to act were numbers that we could not ignore. Right now, there are 500 million people living in period poverty. So when you're confronted with a crisis this large, you have to stop asking, who's the perfect feminist? And have to start asking, how can we create a change? And how can we do it together? 4 years later, it has grown far beyond anything we could have ever imagined. And what has this growth taught me? Well, that when people unite around the same shared goal, feminism becomes impactful. In this case, we united around fighting period poverty and ensuring menstrual dignity. Last September alone, we collected a total of 20,780 pads, 2,578 liners, and 934 tampons. That's the power of focusing on a mission and not on who's a perfect feminist. My favorite word has become complicated, but it doesn't have to stay that way. If we return to the basics, ending machismo culture, exploitation, and oppression, my favorite word can become powerful. And when feminism becomes powerful, it transforms into a movement that people want to join and not fear. A movement that actually changes things. And that's the feminism we should all be choosing. The kind where everyone is welcome and no one is perfect. Thank you.